there are concerns at the moment about how the business community is coping with lockdown. As you know, so many people are on furlough. The furlough scheme and the cost of the economy, £55 billion a month. A month, I repeat. And also, the economy has dropped by 20.4% in April, and when the figures were updated, it was 25% overall. What a shocking thing. And there's major concerns about what people are going to do when schools go back properly and when parents need to get back into work. I'm joined now by a regular on the James Max early breakfast show, but I think it might be his first time being dragged up on a Saturday. This is Frank McKenna, CEO of Downtown in Business. Frank, welcome.
Hi, Andre. Great to be with you.
Now, listen, Frank, you are new to me. So what is Downtown in Business?
Downtown in Business is basically a business organisation representing companies across all sectors in major cities, all the core cities across England, and we represent around 900 companies. Those companies can be SMEs or indeed big business, and we basically represent their views to decision makers at both local government and national government level.
OK, well, in that case, I've just got a really simple question for you. What are your members telling you right now?
Well, I think it's looking bleak at the moment. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. You've just mentioned the furloughing scheme, Andre. That ends, to all intents and purposes, at the end of July. So I think we're going to see a big spike in unemployment numbers. If you're in the hospitality sector at the moment, you're still very uncertain as to whether or not people are going to continue to use your products and services that they've utilised in the past. You still have some doubts as to what this 1 metre plus rule actually means and how you're going to be able to operate within the guidelines and limitations that the government have announced. And then if you look beyond that, then of course you start to see companies who have perhaps had many staff, actually hundreds, thousands of staff across the country, if you say referred to, furloughed, who they now simply will start to make redundant. So the Chancellor now needs to start to turn his attention for protecting jobs, which I think he's done a reasonably good job of doing up to this point, to how he can create jobs moving forward. And what we're calling for, Downtown in Business, is things like a national insurance and pension contribution holiday for those businesses that take on new starters, because that's a barrier, that's an additional cost for them moving forward. We're talking about a radical shake-up of employment law rules because, again, changes that were made a couple of years ago have seen an explosion in vexatious claims in that area. And we also, sadly, and we've been talking about this in our country now for over 30 years, sadly, is we need an injection of serious money into genuine skills training education, not traditional education, but education and training that will prepare people for future jobs, not the traditional jobs in the past, many of which are going to disappear anyway. So big job for the Chancellor coming up. He's got an announcement to make in July. All eyes are on him, and business are hoping that he's as radical and robust in, as I say, creating jobs as he has been in protecting them thus far.
Look, one of the things, Frank, and, you know, previously to doing this job, I worked as a Conservative staffer, so everybody knows my political bent on this. But, you know, one of the huge things that just took place in the Brexit debate was concern around dropping employment rights. I mean, aren't you just talking about the idea of reducing the rights of employees? And isn't the dangers associated with that?
There are, if it's done the wrong way, but I think what we've got to do is get the balance right into this conversation. So, listen, we wouldn't defend bad employers in any way, shape or form. In fact, we campaign for the absolute opposite. But what I would say, Andre, is that explosion in employment tribunal claims has come as a result of fees being removed from the claimants. Now, ultimately, if we'd seen a huge increase in awards through employment tribunals, you would say, well, there you go, that fee was a barrier. Actually, we've seen the reverse. So, as I say, many of those claims have been vexatious. What we're calling for isn't for people to be disadvantaged in terms of going forward to tribunals. What we're asking is for ACAS to be beefed up and for them to be able to stop those vexatious claims from going forward. And if you've got an independent body that has some teeth, rather than an independent body which we fund at the moment but appears to have virtually no power whatsoever, then that, I think, would be an advantage moving forward. And as I say, remove one of the barriers that employers do have at the moment to taking on additional staff.
Well, funnily enough, I was reading something from the CBI. I'm not a great lover of the CBI because obviously, they said that, 2 million jobs would be lost by not adopting the euro and 2 million jobs would be lost by not staying in the EU. I mean, they're on the wrong side of pretty much every debate. But to be fair to them, what they've said is, look, the economy's gone down by 25%. It will bounce back to a large extent. But of course, what if it had dropped by 5% in 1 month when you take it cumulatively? That would be the biggest economic catastrophe that has ever faced this country. And so my concern is that I know that we're going to get back to work. Shops are going to reopen. Bars are going to reopen. Businesses are going to reopen. Kids are going to go back to school. Parents are going to go back into work. But, you might still be talking about drops of 5, 6, 10% a month in the economy. I mean, it's really, really far worse, I think, than most people appreciate.
Andre, I couldn't agree more. I think that, this idea that there's going to be an immediate bounce back, it is pie in the sky, to be honest. And many people, of course, have utilised the last 3 months where we have been able to save money on things like mortgages, and we're not going out as much, of course, on actually paying down debt. And so, as I say, in those service industries who rely on consumer spend, there is a genuine fear that people aren't actually going to have that culture of let's go out, let's spend our cash. And they'll be very reserved, they'll be saving money, they'll be paying down debt. Now, in one sense, of course, that's a good thing, because if people have less debt moving forward, then we're all in a better place. But for those retailers and those in the hospitality sector, that's going to be, as I say, a genuine concern. I think the other area that we've not really touched upon is holidays. And we've seen an announcement in the newspapers today, at least, that there may be now a removal of this ridiculous quarantine that was being introduced. But again, if you look at the aviation industry, it's been decimated over the past 3 or 4 months. Literally thousands of jobs. Places like Gatwick making redundancies, unheard of. These are the places, the engines of growth, who have over the years just continued to grow and basically create jobs. So we've got a massive job ahead, which is why the Chancellor really does need to continue this courageous and bold approach that he's adopted thus far and take us through what is going to be a continued dip and a crisis, but to hopefully come out the other end stronger. That also includes, I'd have to say, big infrastructure spend. So, projects like HS2, like Northern Powerhouse Rail, improvements to motorway and roads. I hope we don't spend too many millions of pounds on white elephant projects, such as cycle lanes all over the place. Great idea in the middle of summer, but on a wet and windy February Wednesday night in Manchester, I can't see many corporate business people jumping on the bicycles to get out and about. So, there are concerns as well, I think, emerging from what some people are starting to suggest as the way forward. But equally, Rishi Sunak, I think, out of all government ministers, has come out of this crisis with some credit. And hopefully, to say, in July, the statement that he makes, what we will see is a really radical set of measures that can begin to allow business to start to recover from what has been, as you've said, Andre, one of the worst hits, if not the worst hit that we've ever seen.
It's really interesting that you've raised the question about infrastructure spending. I'm fascinated by that, and I just want to take you through my view on it. And I can hear that you're from the northwest of England. I'm actually from Lee, and Lee is one of those towns which was historically Labour. And when I say towns, it is almost all towns. One of the northern towns where the Conservatives won at the last election. Now, that was off the back of, and whether you agree with it or not, there was a feeling that the Labour Party had neglected the towns, not the cities. They'd neglected the towns in terms of infrastructure and also over their views on Brexit. Now, let's be clear. People in places like Leigh thought they were going to get big infrastructure spending from Boris, because Boris has always had a track record of spending money on infrastructure. By the way, naming every project after himself, but that's fine, right? Happy with that. Look, at 55 billion a month at the cost of this, can we possibly push ahead with things like Northern Powerhouse and indeed HS2? Because look, there's only a finite amount of money.
Absolutely, but I think what the government have indicated positively is that they see the sense in continuing with those projects, because, of course, what they will be able to achieve is jobs growth immediately. So those projects require lots of construction work. As that money is spent, the government would be saying we're going to get a return on that investment, because the money that we would have been spending otherwise on unemployment benefits for construction workers will actually be going to developing and building the country. And if you look at what we did following the Second World War, then, of course, we spent a huge amount of cash on rebuilding the country at that stage. And we're talking about something of that scale. Mm-hmm. So I think they will continue those infrastructure spends. And I think it's an interesting point you raise. This red wall that the Conservatives managed to smash in December, I think that has much to do with the appalling leadership within the Labour Party at the time, I have to say. Nevertheless, you rightly pointed out that places like Leigh have felt left behind and forgotten, and therefore they would not take kindly to a Conservative government that they, as Boris Johnson said, have lent their vote to, abandoning those plans to start to try and regenerate and create a renaissance of those northern towns moving forward. So I do expect those infrastructure projects to go ahead, but we need much more than that. We do need a re-envisaging of how our high streets are going to look, our town centres are going to look, because the days of retail-led regeneration are behind us. So it's a huge task for the government, a huge task for the Chancellor. You can't underestimate it, which is why they have to be, as I said earlier, courageous, ambitious, bold, thinking in terms of trillions, not even billions moving forward. And really, they probably only have one shot at this, which is the Chancellor's announcement in July. You can't keep coming back to the pot and saying, OK, let's borrow another tranche of money, let's the Bank of England print off another load of cash. You've basically got to set your stall out early, say what cash you're going to spend. Business will then know what the parameters they're operating in, what support is going to be available, and you can move forward on that basis. As I say, I think the government, we could talk all day about the failures on the health side, but on the economy, so far, getting it right, we hope to see that continue.
And as you say, the most important thing, Frank, is this. It's all well and good people being put onto furlough. It's all well and good the government sticking its hand in its pocket, but that must not be a stay of execution, because the number of people that I've spoken to who've been told, hey, look, the minute the furlough's over, you are being made redundant. Now, it is by no means a universal thing. And actually, we don't have the figures yet. We don't know how severe that problem's going to be, but we need to make sure that is minimised.
Absolutely. We did a survey of our members 3 or 4 weeks ago, and sadly, at 75% of those who responded, albeit a relatively small survey, about 150 companies, have suggested that they anticipate making redundancies across the next 12 months. Now, that's a significant number just within those businesses, and if every company in the country were making 2-3 redundancies, then you can imagine the impact that's going to have on unemployment figures. The other thing I would say is that the furloughing scheme, though positive, and I can understand and appreciate the reasons Rishi Sunak did that, has created, I think, this false sense of security within some people. And again, when you're in your back garden, the sun's shining, and you're happily being paid most, if not all, of your salary, it can become a little bit comfortable. And, what I've been surprised by, I have to say, is the lack of pressure that is being put on schools to get back in. Because again, when businesses are looking at how can we get back to some form of normality through the summer, we then look at what's happening with our schools. And although we are approaching, of course, summer holidays, what the vast majority of schools do is they open the doors for things like summer clubs. So we've also got that childcare challenge heading towards us as well. Again, I think it's been lamentable in the way in which the Education Secretary, alongside, I have to say, our teaching unions, have been almost silent on a radical strategy. It doesn't have to be that radical, actually, to get our kids back into schools.
I have to pull Frank, I've agreed with you on absolutely everything. I've got to pull you up. But the idea that managing to get teachers to bother to go into work is radical. I mean, I know that's not exactly what you meant. But look, I think Murray Boosted, the head of the teaching union, and Gavin Williamson both need to be removed from office. I think what has happened is absolutely disgusting. And the damage that happens to young people this year. And the thing that annoys me more than anything else, Frank, is this. We all know that if you base your entry to college or your university on predicted grades, people from poorer backgrounds, people from disadvantaged backgrounds get worse predicted grades than they get in the actual exams. And therefore, you are disadvantaging people who are already disadvantaged. I find the whole thing on education absolutely disgusting.
It's been, as I said, lamentable. I can't think of a better word to describe the performance on education. And I think anybody that's involved in that sector really does need to look at themselves in the mirror. I mean, businesses, we've had to react nimbly. We've had to become far more innovative in the way that we've continued to operate. So we're all on this thing called Zoom. Now, I thought that was an ice lolly. Back in the day. Now we're all utilising that facility. Why can't teachers do Zoom classes?
Absolutely. Now look, Frank, we're completely out of time, but I just want to ask you, blue or red?
I'm a blue.
Oh, there you go. So even though you're a Scouser, you're not celebrating.
Absolutely not. Although we all like to say congratulations to those that win the league, and Liverpool have done a grand job on the field this year. As a bitter blue, I'd have to say I'm just looking forward to Carlo Ancelotti getting Everton back to its rightful place in the not too distant future.
Fantastic. That is Frank McKenna.